The average person is said to spend 15 minutes in the bathroom. Why not take advantage of that time and learn something new? Presenting the 15-minute podcast on weird facts, crazy details, and funny particulars that you'll be able to enjoy while you're taking a on your free time. Welcome to The Shit with Sam Butler.
Welcome to another episode of The Shit Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Butler. Thank you guys for joining me on this episode of The Shit Podcast. We did the last episode on Geronimo, and when I was researching Geronimo, I came across this very interesting article, and I was like, it can't be true. So I started researching, and guess what? It's absolutely true. Blew my mind. And this is something that I wanted to share with you guys on this episode of The Shit. I hope that you guys are having a good morning on your commute. Whatever it is that you're up to, I appreciate you tuning in. With that being said, we're going to talk about the Cherokee women. That's right, Cherokee women shocked me the way their family structure was set up, the way that they believed and the things that they did. And it's really shocking because it seems like that's what we're trying to get back to in society. And it has to do a lot with equality, gender equality within a family. And we see how they were very advanced for their time. For example, in the Cherokee culture, a woman could decide whether she wanted to be a housewife or a warrior. Now, that's something that even in today's society is still kind of like, well, not too many women warriors. Well, the women, if they decided to be warriors, they would be warriors, and the tribe respected them for their bravery. Didn't treat them any less because they were women warriors. They looked at them like, these girls want to be warriors, they can be warriors. And the whole tribe did this. Or the woman could decide to be the housewife. Now, when you think about the housewife, a lot of times you're thinking about like June Cleaver and Leave It to Beaver, a lady doing the dishes, and no, totally different situation. In the Cherokee culture, the woman was the one who decided which man she wanted to be with. Obviously, it was consensual, and obviously, it was based on mutual attraction. It wasn't just like, well, you're mine. No, it was like there was a mutual attraction, but ultimately it was the woman who decided, I want this man. Now, if she decided that she wanted to be with a man and he accepted, at that point, she could decide to just live with him and not necessarily marry him. And they could do a trial period as a couple and figure out, is this somebody I want to spend the rest of my life with? Is this somebody I don't want to spend the rest of my life with? Is this something that I want to keep going with? And if she decided she didn't want to, the man would walk away, no harm, no foul. Thanks for the good times. It was wonderful. They could even have kids during this period. There wasn't a problem. The tribe did not look at it as a problem. What they thought was, okay, they're trying it out, which makes perfect sense. I mean, how many people buy shoes without trying them on first? I don't know, right? You ever go buy a car without test driving it? I don't know. So they were going, they had this period. I mean, this was pretty liberal for that time frame that they could just like test drive the relationship for a while. And then if she didn't like it, didn't think the guy was the right guy, if he pretended to be somebody he wasn't, which is hard to think, like, what could you pretend to be in the 1800s that you're not? But if he pretended to be somebody that he wasn't, she could decide, this is not at all what I expected. This is not at all who I thought it was. Bye. There was no problem. There was no moral problem within the tribe. They could also get married, though. And after being married for a while, if she came to the decision that she did not want to be with the guy, all she had to do was leave his things outside of the door of their house. And of course, the Cherokee Indians were located in the southeastern United States, which is now South Carolina, Tennessee, all those states, the woodlands of the southeast. And so they had pretty, substantial structures to live in. So if the woman decided, hey, you're out, the guy was out, and he would grab his things and he'd go. And nobody thought anything of it. She wasn't shunned. There wasn't any repercussions. It was like, okay, she decided she's done. She's done. The guy would respect it, and they would move on. Now, this was very, very common, or it was very accepted, and it was because from their point of view, Earth was our mother, and a mother bears new life. And so there's something special about a woman carrying a baby to term and having a baby born and producing new life. So the tribe looked at the woman, revered the woman as something very special, as part of the lineage of Earth, part of Mother Earth. And then you have mother, and then they would have kids. Now, you think, well, they have kids, and the next of kin would be the father. Well, that wasn't the way the tribe looked at it. The tribe looked at it like the next of kin is not the father. The next of kin, the next male kin, I should specify, is not the father, but the mother's brother. Being that he's the mother's brother, he has more of a physical relation to the kids than the father. That was their mentality. Well, this really made white settlers uneasy because of course, the Christian background that we all have, that we all grew up with, where the patriarchy and man is head of the house and the woman is subservient to the man. And so we're looking at this like, what do you mean the father doesn't have the rights? Now, as a dad of two girls, I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like I'm the next of kin of my kids. But it's interesting that their point of view was the relationship between sister and brother as to the relationship of her kids as being the closest relationship to a male, not necessarily the father. We've been over that. So the woman would also keep the house since she was the one that was in charge of looking after the family, looking after everyone, because she was the farmer. If she decided to be a housewife, the woman would stay as a farmer. The man was always a hunter. So hunter-gatherer, and she would do all of the gardening and the farming. And together, they both had to contribute to the family. They both had to put their part. But those were generally the roles of the Cherokee tribe, where the woman was the farmer, the provider of certain foods. The father was also a provider, but she was ultimately looked at as the person with the best judgment. So if she decided you're done, you're out of here, I don't want to be with you anymore, all she had to do was leave your stuff outside and you were gone. Now, the reason that they saw this as something very respectable was because the woman lived under a tremendous moral pressure. In other words, she understood that for her to get rid of her husband was not an easy decision or one that should be taken lightly. She looked at it as, this is my family, this is our family, this is something I have to protect, this is something I have to be a part of. And so to remove someone from the family, what was morally troubling to her, and that was imposed. It was a very revered, the family nucleus was very revered. So for her to decide to break that up, it had to be a very, very, very tough decision for her. And if she came to that decision, the rest of the tribe would respect it because they understood that she understood that it's not something to be taken lightly. As a matter of fact, the rest of the tribe women would discuss the situation and they would give the final okay on the divorce. But it was ultimately the women that had the power and the say to say yes or no, which to me is like shocking. Now, in February of 1757, the great Cherokee leader Atakula went to South Carolina to negotiate trade with the governor and was shocked to find out that there was no women there. And she asked and said, hey, the white man as well as the red was born from a woman. Did not the white man admit women in their council? And the governor was so taken back by this questioning that it actually took him a couple of days to respond. And he said, well, the white men do place their confidence in their women and share counsels with them when they know their hearts are good. but that was something that was very foreign to the Native American, to the Europeans. The idea that a woman had that kind of power and clout. Now, something that I found that was very, very interesting was how both men and women were very sexually liberated for their time. Unions were based on mutual attraction. The concept of being ashamed of your body was a foreign mindset. They didn't care about what they look like. If you're a little bit overweight, if you're not overweight, it had nothing to do with that. So there was a lot of sexual freedom. But if you decided to marry, it was expected that you would be faithful to your partner. But if you had a slip up, it wasn't considered such a bad thing as it is in today's society, where it's a deal breaker. It was considered a slip up like any other slip up, like you got home drunk that night, or you stayed out too late, or you spent your whole paycheck at the bar. Oh, you slept with this other girl, or you slept with this other dude. It was just like, you messed up. But it wasn't a deal breaker. And we know that the deal breaker it came to us through our Christian upbringing. And so to me, it was very, very interesting to find this out. It was the shit. The traditional Cherokee single mixers were charged with sexual energy, and they were regulated through ceremony. In other words, it was very sexual, but it was very ceremonial, and they would do a lot of moves, sexual moves that you would see mimicking relations. And of course, when you have Europeans settling and you have puritanical views, and you're showing up and you're watching all these ceremonies go down, you're watching these young people thrusting the hips and shaking the booty and doing all the things that they do, it created a clash. Now, there's a lot of information to cover in 15 minutes, but I'd suggest that you look it up. It's a great topic for conversation. It's very interesting how there was a society where women and men had the same kind of balance of power. If you guys saw my episode with Jorge Rodallegas when we talked about Sarah Rector, that was a very interesting episode because we discovered that there was tribes that actually owned slaves. Well, the Cherokee were one of these 5 civilized tribes. And the reason they were considered civilized was because the Cherokee decided that they had to assimilate the Western culture. And by doing so, they'd be more accepted. And they were looking for that acceptance and to be part of a peaceful society. So this is part of the tribes that started wearing traditional Western clothing. They started wearing top hats and jackets, and they also started adopting some of the traditions like slavery. How did that become about? Well, they stopped hunting and they got more into farming, and then they started selling their goods, and they could not keep up with the demand. So then they saw that the white settler was buying slaves, and that's how they could keep up with their demands. So they would buy slaves and have them work with them. Now, in the Sarah Rector episode, we also talked about how they weren't as mean to the slaves as the white owners, to the point that the white owners feared that the slaves that were in captivity with the Native Americans were going to be encouraging the slaves from other plantations. So they offered to send white guys to keep them in line. But the natives, really what they were trying to do was keep up with production. So I thought that was the next best thing, and we know Sarah Rector was a product of that. And so these are the tribes, and everything happened because they tried to be more like their Western counterparts. They tried to be more, and in doing so, more white, and in doing so, they lost their traditions. They lost a lot of their respect for their own women. They adopted a constitution that was modeled after the U.S. Constitution with the 3 branches of government, and that constitution limited women's rights to the point that the 1900s Cherokee women had to fight for their voting rights and their same rights that they had had previously because they had gone away. Well, that's all for this episode of the Shit Podcast. It's a very, very fascinating topic. If you have an opportunity to do some research on it, it's great. But I want to thank you guys once again for joining me on the podcast. I apologize for last week, but this is a new week, and we thank you guys. Well, it wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago. But thank you guys once again. Thanks, Ram, for producing the podcast. And guys, that wraps us up. Please like and subscribe. Hit the notifications bell. I get paid in likes and subscriptions, and I get paid with comments, and that pay goes to my production costs. So thank you guys for all the support. Please tell your friends. Please like and share. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. I just solely love doing this for y'all. So thank you once again. We'll catch you next week on another episode of the Shit Podcast.